Senator Toomey.
I guess it is. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to go back to a comment made by Senator Kane, with which I agree. A budget resolution could choose to focus as a priority any number of things. Some want to focus mostly on redistributing wealth. Others have other priorities. For me, I think creating an environment to maximize the opportunity to grow our economy and create jobs should be the highest priority. And on this, I have to say, I think this Democratic budget, which we have not yet seen, but from what we've read and what we understand, I think it's going to fail that test pretty badly. Let me start with the spending side. I would argue strongly that increasing government spending from its current levels is going to hurt economic growth. It's not going to help economic growth. And yet our Democratic budget is going to call for more. Spending is nearly 23% of GDP now. It's up about 19% in just the last 4 years, despite inflation being up just a little over 6%. The federal government spending has doubled in the last 12 years. We've had massive stimulus bills. We've nationalized companies. We've nationalized some entire industries. We've expanded welfare spending, increased eligibility. We've done all of those things. And this budget's going to call for more of that. Let's look on the spending side. And I would start by reminding my colleagues that as recently as 2007, with lower tax rates than we have in place now, we had a budget deficit that was 1.2% of GDP, a very low and very manageable number with lower rates than we have today. So raising rates is not the answer here. But that's what's happened these last 4 years. We've already had a great deal of very substantial tax increases. I would remind my colleagues of the tax increases that were embedded in the Affordable Care Act. That bill gave us higher taxes on people with health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts, higher taxes on people with catastrophic medical expenses, higher taxes on people who buy medical devices, higher taxes on people who buy health insurance, higher taxes on people who don't buy health insurance, which some think of as a penalty either way, higher taxes on employers who can't afford the expensive health care, which has been made more expensive by this legislation, higher taxes on families with health plans that Washington believes are excessive. So that all added up to over $1 trillion in tax increase that was passed. And then at the end of last year, just 11 weeks ago, we had a $620 billion tax increase that brings the total up to $1.8 trillion in tax hikes in just the last several years. And now we're told we have a budget introduced by our friends on the other side of the aisle that calls for yet another $1 trillion in additional tax increases above and beyond all of those. So what's the result, Ben, of all of these spending increases and all of these tax increases, some of which have already occurred, others of which are threatened? We've got the worst economic recovery since the Great Depression. That's what we've gotten. Unemployment stuck somewhere near 8%, actually much higher if you consider those who are underemployed and the millions who've left the workforce. GDP growth that's been miserable and decelerating. So we've got a bad situation that's been getting worse over the last several years. And I would suggest this is because increasing government spending does not, in fact, lead to stronger economic growth. If it did, I suppose Greece would have a great economy. It doesn't. We hear frequently from people who suggest that if the government reins in spending now, we could have another recession. Think about this. The premise seems to be that somehow the economy, the growth in the economy depends on a huge bloated federal government that grows even more. This is ridiculous. The basis of economic growth is in the private sector. And all of this spending by the federal government weakens economic growth. It misallocates resources, distorts economic activity. There's tremendous amount of waste and duplication that we all know about. And of course, it precedes and drives tax increases. Tax increases themselves are a huge disincentive to work and savings and investment. So I would just suggest that the spending and taxes increases that we've already seen have not been good for the economy. Doing more is not suddenly going to change that. So I think this budget takes us in the wrong direction. I will say it is certainly progress that we're doing a budget, and I'm glad we're having this debate. It is constructive to be having the discussion. I think there probably are some areas where there is some agreement, clearly not on some of the big macro issues, but in some of the areas. And I certainly look forward to the debate and amendment process. So, Madam Chairman, you do have a tough job, and I acknowledge that, and I appreciate the fact that we've at least gotten to this point.